A lot of people don't think they can send their kids to public schools unless they're fully vaccinated, and that's not actually the case at all.
Welcome to One Nation Under God. It's back to school time, and a lot of parents think about vaccines. But because of the past few years, there is a vaccine that is on the hearts and minds of all Americans, and that is the COVID-19 vaccine. Religious exemptions becoming a big talking point among communities of faith, and so much a talking point that it's newsworthy. So we wanted to speak to Pastor Jackson Lahmeyer from Sheridan Church. Is that right? Sheridan Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
You got it. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Good to have you with us. I think for a lot of people, they've heard about religious exemptions. There are still a few states that do not have them. But can you tell us what a religious exemption to vaccination means?
Yeah, so it's basically there are kind of two forms that you can go with. There's the medical side. You got to have a medical exemption for maybe you have a condition that it would be not so good to take a vaccine. Therefore, you have a medical exemption. But there's a lot of people that have faith-based issues with taking vaccines. They have a religious issue, and it actually varies from the span of what the religious reason may be. There are obviously some Christians, they don't believe in, modern day medicine, and that is their right to believe that. There are other Christians that they do believe in modern day medicine, but they don't agree with some of the ingredients that make up a vaccine, especially the COVID-19 vaccine with mRNA technology inside of it. And so there's a plethora of reasons why, but religious exemptions are very effective.
And there are people who really just don't feel like the government should be telling anyone what to do. And so, is part of a religious exemption the freedom of liberty that people of faith believe they have?
Absolutely, yeah. And so, since 2021, I've actually signed over 70,000 COVID-19 religious exemption forms for people all across the country. And you'd be shocked. It's 2024 and school's starting back, and we're signing them every single day because parents, they don't feel comfortable putting, especially a vaccine that's brand new on the market, right? I mean, it's still a brand new vaccine, and they don't feel comfortable with it. So we're still signing them today. And it's not because we're anti-vaxxers. We're pro-freedom. We're pro, the parents make the best decisions for their children, and adults make the best decisions for themselves along with their doctors. And so it's a very dicey issue, unfortunately. But yes, freedom of religion, freedom of decision.
Now, you said a couple of things that I have to make sure we touch on. One is 70,000
Over, yeah.
religious exemptions signed by you. I'm guessing you just said all over the country, but how do people find you to write that doctor's note or that pastor's note?
Well, it's actually a very funny story. There's a Bible verse that says what the enemy meant for evil, God intended for good. Well, the Washington Post, which is not my favorite outlet, they did a hit piece on me in 2021 because I was signing exemptions for people in my church and I was signing religious exemptions. And so the Washington Post did a very nasty hit piece on me. I didn't like myself after I read it, and it was that bad. And so they did this hit piece, and I just asked them, I'd comment on the story if they would include my website in the story. And so they did. And so when you go to Google and you type in COVID-19 religious exemption form, my website is the first thing that pops up thanks to the Washington Post. So the reason we've signed over 70,000 exemptions is because of a hit piece that the Washington Post wrote. So what they meant for evil, God intended for good. And we've saved thousands and thousands of jobs over the last 3 years.
I want to talk about that, but I also want to ask for those who see your name in the paper or see it on this site, do you think there are those who would take advantage and use a religious exemption just because they don't want to get vaccinated?
Well, sure. And so obviously, we don't just sign them flippantly. So we have a process in which people have to go through in order for my signature to appear on. They can download a totally blank exemption form to take to their pastor. We always encourage people to go to their pastor first. But if their pastor refuses, which unfortunately a lot of pastors have done that, then we have a process for them to have me sign it. And so it's not just something they can acquire easily.
In terms of those who would say, why have you made this a passion project when there are people who, especially those with pre-existing conditions, who had illnesses prior to COVID could be at risk. Why is this so important for you to sign these exemptions and to allow people the liberty, again, to not be vaccinated? What do you tell them?
Well, I never had the intention to sign 70,000 COVID-19 exemption forms. That was never something, I don't think anybody sets out in life and says, that's what I want to do. But it kind of fell in our lap because of the Washington Post. I was doing it for people in my church, people that were friends of people in my church. And then it just kind of took on a national factor because of them. And then you just hear the stories. I mean, the stories that come back to us of people who are just so thankful because they got to keep their job, or they were able to get their child into the university, or they were able to go to, a lot of people don't think they can send their kids to public schools unless they're fully vaccinated. And that's not actually the case at all. And so a lot of people and their gratefulness over the last 3 years kind of keeps you doing it because friends refer friends. Google, there's also a great referral as well when people are searching for that. And so we've been able to help a lot of people.
And you say, keep jobs. So there were folks who were being told by their employer that they had to get the COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, we saw it across the board. And they would be released from work unless they had a religious exemption. Was there a story that stood out to you from those who
Oh
sought you
man,
out?
we had people, these are working adults, and so many of them have children, right? And so, they're tempted to take a vaccine they don't feel comfortable with, that they've got an issue with, just because they know they got to provide for their kids, right? And unfortunately, there were some people who were unaware that they could get a religious exemption. And they took the vaccine. They came back to me and talked about the health issues that they've had since then that they would attribute to it. And so those stories are the tough ones because they were pressured, coerced, and forced into doing something they weren't comfortable with. And so, being able to help people make their own decisions. Like I said, we're not anti-vaxxers. We're just pro-freedom. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you should have that decision without losing your job. That was the saddest part because this is the United States of America. Yet, unfortunately, over the last 4 years, a lot has changed in our culture. And luckily, we've been able to help out.
Have you received the opposite of the intended effect? Have you received messages from people who critique you as you believed you were critiqued in that article and said some very nasty things to you or said
Oh, yeah.
things that were threatening?
Oh, that's just a part of the game, though. There's crazies on both ends of the spectrum. And anytime you're doing something that is being, put into the Washington Post or the New York Times or just whatever the case, you're going to get hate and you're going to get feedback for that. And so that's just part of it.
But in terms of how you've been able to maintain your value system, I mean, some could say, it gets pretty hot when you're getting national attention for what you believe is right, but there are a lot of people who disagree. So, how have you maintained your calm and not taken any of those unkind comments to heart?
Yeah, well, every month I get a letter from the Satanic Temple. They're very consistent in sending me letters because, they're not on our team. And, you have a lot of left leaning organizations that have, done. I have a petition right now against me from Faithful America. And, it's a group of religious people on the left. And so it's just, it comes with the territory, when you're over the target. Unfortunately, arrows start flying your way. But I understand it. I understand just as people are passionate, say, on the right, there are people passionate on the left. And, we're doing the right thing, in my opinion. And you do the right thing simply because it's the right thing. It's not always the politically correct thing to do.
Well, and there was a school, Rutgers University, as recent as last year, I know, they were still requiring COVID-19 vaccination proof for students to be admitted to their college. Have you, even all these years later, still received requests from people thinking, I need to get a religious exemption?
So the main group that we give exemptions for right now, early on, it was working adults just trying to keep their jobs. The main group is college students,
Mhm.
actually, because a lot of public universities still have these measures in place from 2021. And so the main group of people that we're currently signing exemptions for are people going into the university or children going in the public schools.
And so, what are you saying to them? Because with children in public schools, I would imagine you haven't seen mandates for little kids, have you?
No, these, well, it just depends on the public school and depends on the age. You got high school. I've not seen it for little kids that I'm aware of. But, there are also religious exemptions that people are using for other vaccines that they don't feel comfortable with putting their kids and things like that. So instead of going the medical exemption route, they choose to go the religious exemption route, which honestly is actually a lot stronger. The religious exemption route is very strong because an employer, a university, or a school does not want to get in a fight with the First Amendment.
Mm. And so what types of vaccinations are you now signing religious exemptions for in addition to COVID-19?
It's a case by case. Obviously, COVID-19 is our main one that we help people with. Other people, they will contact us about everything and anything in regards to different types of vaccines. We'll even have people reach out to us in regards to an exemption for like the flu shot, because I guess there are some places that require you to have the flu shot. And so we get, all kinds of people reaching out to us, and we just vet it, we go through it, and then we help out those that we can.
In terms of people who would critique this and say this is just a legal loophole, you've said a couple of times we're not anti-vaxxers, but there are people who are going to see what you're doing as contributing to an anti-vaxxing culture in America. They're going to throw out statistics about how many lives were saved, millions of lives saved because of the vaccine versus those who had adverse effects and still even caught the vaccine multiple times. So what would you say to those who say this is illegitimate and this is just a way to evade something that's a public health issue?
Well, it's a foundational constitutional issue within our republic. You have the freedom of religion, not the freedom from religion. And so people are basing their decisions upon their religious beliefs. We come alongside, we help them in that. And I'll tell you, I've never actually met anybody who regrets not taking the COVID-19 vaccine. I've met thousands of people all across this country. I travel. I've met thousands of people that regret their decision in taking that particular vaccine. So I've never met anybody say, "Oh man, I wish I would have taken that." But I have met a lot of people saying, "I wish I would have never done that. Here are the health effects that I have suffered because of that decision." So, we've been labeled super spreaders. We've been labeled, it was, I think it was the New York Times. Maybe don't hold me to it. They labeled my church as the branch Covidians. If you remember the branch Davidians down in Texas,
Yes.
we've been labeled all kinds of stuff, and it's just part of the territory.
How large is your church?
So here in Tulsa, we have about 700 members in person. In Oklahoma City, we have another campus where there's about 125, and then our online membership is about 2,500.
So you're a medium-sized church
Yeah,
in America. How long have you been a pastor?
7 years.
7 years. So you're a younger pastor. It's an older church, so a community church. Is what you're saying to your congregation and to those who want the religious exemption something that you find in the Bible, or is this a political issue to you that people in the pulpit should be discussing?
Well, I think it's both. So, in regards to people say, "Oh, you're preaching politics," no, not really. These are biblical issues. They'll say if you talk about marriage, that's political. Marriage isn't political. Marriage is biblical. Gender is not political. Gender is biblical. I could go on and on. These are just in the opening pages of the Bible. These are not political issues. These are very much biblical issues. In regards to your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit if you're a believer. And so, what you do with your body actually matters because you're the temple of God here on earth. And so, this is not a political issue. Now, it's politicized. There's no doubt about it. You have to play the game of politics. You understand this is part of the American way. We live in a constitutional republic. However, people will label us as a political church. We're not a political church. We're a biblical church, and we just address issues that we are facing today, which I think other churches should as well.
And I think that there are a lot more pastors who became vocal about political issues over the course of the past 3 years with closing down places of worship and that infringing on the rights of those who are who consider themselves believers. I want to read you some statistics from the CDC. So there was data between 2011 and 2023, and that kindergartners nationwide up until, I guess, 2020, we actually didn't see a lot of religious exemptions among kindergartners at all until recent years. We saw the first time a huge rise, a spike in non medical exemptions. And then the coverage, or people who were vaccinated who were college age, 93% of them reported being fully vaccinated. And then we saw an increase in more than 40 states during the past few years. Do you think that COVID was a watershed moment for people who decided what to put in their body? Or did we not have proper data showing just how many people were against vaccinations and they made that decision over the past 3 years?
Well, I'll shoot it straight with you. Whenever the COVID-19 vaccine rollout took place, if you remember those morons that were public officials on television bribing us with donuts, lottery tickets, they were bribing us with French. You remember the guy from New York, the governor of New York? He's eating a burger and a French fry, saying, "Oh, this is so good. Come get your vaccine. We'll give you this." All right. So they bribed people, and people were like, "That's kind of weird, you know? Why are you bribing us?" Then, when the bribery didn't work, here came the mandates. Well, if you don't take this, we tried to incentivize you to take this. If you don't take it, you're going to lose your job. All of a sudden, people are saying, okay, why are you selling this so hard? Why are you trying to force this so hard? And people had questions. And then once you start digging, all of a sudden you find out, I don't know if I want to put an experimental mRNA changing technology in my body. And people made decisions for themselves. And so I think it just made people more aware, because think about it, you know, we would take vaccines for granted. You know, one of the breakthroughs in modern medicine and all those type of things. And 2020 caused people to ask questions because of the way the government handled it. The government handled it so poorly, with the bribes, with the mandates, that it caused people to ask questions.
And that's fair. I mean, I think a lot of people were wondering, why am I being incentivized to do something when prior to this, people were getting
Come get your
vaccinated for all
donuts.
kinds.
Come get your French
Yeah,
fries. It was like, okay, a lottery ticket. I mean, these people were just crazy. And that, to me, and then when you didn't do it, well, now we're going to fire you. Now we're going to punish you. Americans don't respond to that.
yeah, and there were a lot of people, in fact, healthcare workers, who left their jobs because they were not allowed to work in hospitals because they chose to not be vaccinated, and some of them were not issued a religious exemption. I've seen cases of that. Listen to this. This is another stat from the CDC, that lower levels of vaccine coverage raise the risk of outbreaks. So there was a lot of talk from the government that, again, you mentioned super spreader, that clusters of under-vaccinated children would actually lead to more outbreaks. So that pushed more immunization programs in schools, including universities, and that requirement passed itself through the university system. But, whether it's measles, mumps, and rubella or COVID, what's your response on that, to have larger groups of communities, perhaps in a faith community where children are not immunized? Do you think there's a risk there?
Well, nobody trusts the CDC. I mean, come on, look what happened in 2020. So, in regards to outbreaks, the only people I know that are still getting COVID. Now, listen, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I know a lot of people and I travel the country. The only people I know that are getting COVID are the ones that actually took the vaccine. I've never taken the vaccine. People in my church, most of them have not, and we've not had any issues with that. And so, in regards to outbreaks, it seems like the outbreaks are among those that took the COVID-19 vaccine. I don't know anybody that did not take the vaccine that is getting COVID. That's just,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and well, you've done 70,000 exemptions, so I imagine you know some people. Just talking about the future of America, depending upon who gets elected to the White House, you've got former President Trump actually making a statement saying that he would not give one penny to any school that has a vaccine or a mask mandate. And his campaign said he's referring specifically to school COVID-19 vaccine mandates. You are the founder of a group called Pastors for Trump. We wanted to make sure we put that out there. So I think a lot of people criticize former President Trump for not being holy or for not demonstrating Christian values in his conversation or his delivery. So, why do you and this group of pastors support former President Trump?
Well, President Trump has been the most pro-Christian president in modern history, and the list is too long for me to mention, but I can just name a few. He is the one who appointed Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe v. Wade, which people like myself, we always wanted that, but I don't know if we actually thought that would ever happen, and it actually happened because of President Donald Trump. President Trump made a promise that, let's see, Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Barack Obama all made, that they would move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Every one of those presidents made the promise to do that. None of them did. Donald Trump moved the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Not only that, he struck the Abraham Accord. So the list of what he's done for the Christian community, he gave pastors and religious leaders a seat at the table, whereas other presidents did not. And so, President Trump, is he a perfect man? No, not at all. Neither am I. And I'm a pastor. I'm a pastor. I'm not a perfect guy. I compare President Trump a lot to King David. King David had a lot of flaws. We know many of those flaws. However, King David was also labeled by God as a man after his own heart. And so I see President Trump as a man that God is using as an instrument of justice, as an instrument of righteousness in our country. And that's why we have over 10,000 pastors in all 50 states that are a part of Pastors for Trump.
Real quick, just for people who are watching this who don't know anything about the significance of moving the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, could you just touch on that really briefly, even though it has
So,
nothing to do with COVID? I just
yeah,
wanted to make sure we alerted our viewers.
so the significance of the United States of America recognizing Jerusalem as the holy city and the capital city of the nation of Israel was huge. Remember, everyone said that if Donald Trump actually moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, he would start World War III. Well, actually, the exact opposite happened. We had, for the first time in my lifetime, we had peace. In the Middle East, which is very different than what we have right now. And so by moving the embassy, the United States of America said, we recognize Jerusalem as the capital city of the nation of Israel, which then obviously the Palestinians don't like, the Islamic countries don't like, yet Donald Trump did it. Every other president from Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Barack Obama promised to do it. None of them did. Donald Trump did it.
Yeah, and a lot of people would say that what we're witnessing right now is the start of World War III there. But those problems, those ills between Israel and Gaza have been going on for quite some time, well before that move. But I wanted to ask you your thoughts on, even though you're pastors for Trump, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He has been very vocal about not forcing a vaccine mandate and the concerns, the health concerns about mRNA specifically. Why do you believe that more Christians are not for RFK Jr.?
Okay, well, so on that particular issue, we're in alignment and we're in agreement. I think RFK Jr. has been a great spokesperson in regards to making people aware of the vaccine issue. However, as a Christian, I can't support him. I mean, he's a radical leftist that believes in abortion into the late term. I mean, he's a huge abortion supporter. He's also a supporter of the Green New Deal and those environmental regulations. And so he's a far leftist. And so, from a political position, I can't support him. From a biblical position, I can't support him. And so, now in regards to this one singular issue, well, we're in agreement there. I've met with RFK Jr. before. I think he's a good person. I think he's a nice guy. But on those policy issues, I just can't get on board.
What would you tell someone who's not a conservative nor a Christian about what they might not understand about how the two are linked? Because I think more than ever, we've seen a big Christian movement within the Republican Party. If somebody was to watch the progression of the party, they could see that this has been going on for a long time, but particularly at the RNC, where you saw evidences of faith and prayer and a commitment to God, and even former President Trump giving glory to God for surviving that assassination attempt. And then tying that with some of these issues like vaccine religious exemptions. What would you tell someone who doesn't know anything about faith about why so many Christians consider themselves conservatives? What is the game-changing importance of being conservative?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, conservative means we're trying to conserve, especially traditional values that help build the United States of America. America was founded as a Christian nation. That's undeniable, regardless of what Barack Obama says. This was founded as a Christian nation. So, what does it mean to be a conservative? Well, conservatives, now the platform doesn't completely align with biblical values, and we understand that. But if you look at the Democratic platform compared to the Republican platform, it's not even close in regards to the issue of marriage, in regards to the issue of life, gender, all these other type of things. And so Christians are the largest voting bloc in the United States of America. So largest voting bloc by far, especially the evangelical voting bloc. 8 out of 10 evangelicals voted for Donald Trump in 2016. 8 out of 10 voted for Donald Trump in 2020. So why do evangelicals break towards the Republican nominee? It's because of the value system. As a Christian, as a Bible-believing Christian, I cannot get on board with the murder of innocent babies in the womb of their mother. I cannot get on board with the craziness of the transgender LGBTQ going on. I can't get on board with that because of the value system that I hold to. And so that's why Christians, 8 out of 10, are going to politically affiliate with the Republican Party. Does not mean the Republican Party is perfect. These are political parties, and so they are flawed in and of themselves. However, one is much closer to Christian values than the other.
And again, this isn't just you choosing the lesser evil between the two parties. There are significant issues, platform agendas that you believe as a Christian you must side with, and that is why you choose to be a member of the Republican Party.
Life, gender, marriage, that's all in Genesis 1 and 2. And from there, if you can't get on board with just those three simple things, I can't vote for you.
And there are a lot of people of faith who, even our own president, President Biden, who's Catholic, who is pro-abortion. So there are people who choose different
He's not a good
items.
Catholic. They won't even serve him communion. And if you don't get served communion as a Catholic, you're going to hell. So he's not a good Catholic.
Okay, well, that's another conversation. That's a conversation that's far above my pay grade. You ran for Senate in 2022. Are you considering running again?
Oh, you always keep that door open. I had the time of my life. I'd never ran for anything. I'm a pastor, never wanted to run for anything. But General Michael Flynn called me and he said, "Hey, I want you to run for this." And I said, "Yes, sir." And it was a great experience. I met so many people and I personally grew. I grew. And, the right race at the right time. We're looking at one in particular right now that I might this is kind of breaking news, I guess, because I've never said this publicly. We're looking at one right now that I might throw my hat in the ring for.
And you can't tell us what that one thing
Not
is?
yet. Not yet. We're not there yet. But how about this? If you'll have me back on when we're ready to say, I'll tell you. How about that?
All right, fair. Thank you for the little teaser there. One more quick question for parents who are enrolling their children in school, getting ready to send their kids back to class. What do you know about the law regarding COVID vaccine and any vaccine mandates and religious exemptions? Do they have a right to receive a religious exemption no matter where they go to school?
Yeah, so it's one of those things that a lot of parents will have their kids vaccinated, even though they don't want to, simply just so they can go to school, right? That's their thought process and I don't know why that's the thought process, but that's actually not legally true. Your kids do not have to be vaccinated in order to attend public schools. Now, some schools may put up a bigger fight than other schools, but there are religious exemptions that you can utilize. There are even medical exemptions that you can utilize, but you do not have to vaccinate your kids in order to send them to school. And it's very unfortunate because a lot of parents think they have to do this, even though they don't want to do it. They feel like they have to, but the reality is you do not as a parent. There are ways to go around it.
Okay. Well, that's something that certainly every parent should become educated on in their school district, in their county, in their state. Pastor Jackson Lahmeyer, thank you so much. Sheridan Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We appreciate your time. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.